Hello, I'm Soycat, and one thing that almost every country on Earth has in common is a National Independence Day. This is weird to me, being from the UK, where we don't have one. You kind of assume that it's something that only colonies would have, but yet almost every country on Earth, even super old-feeling countries like Sweden or Norway, tend to have an Independence Day. So why is it that almost every country does have one? Where did they get their independence from? And also, why do most countries seem to go independent in August, September, and July? The summer period is the most likely time to gain independence, with April, March, and like the early part of the year being the least likely time. What is the deal with this? And also, why is there 7.5 countries becoming independent in April? What's the deal with that? Let's explain all of it and more in today's fun video about independence, which I can totally relate to because my country definitely became independent from another one recently. That's a big thing people are always talking about, the UK. More seriously though, obviously there is a really key point that I wanted to show off of this map, which is the map of independence. A lot of people love to talk about when their country became independent, but it kind of implies that before it was independent, it was part of another country. This map shows the flag of the country, which you would have been a part of before gaining independence. And obviously, I just have to point out, like, yeah, of course, I'm from the UK, and wow, there sure is a lot of British flags there. You might notice the fun detail that the British flag they use changes depending on what the British flag was at the time. So the flag design actually changed between when the US became independent and Canada did, for example. I like the new design, but I like the old one too. I think it's a pretty classy flag. So you'll see all across the world, there's a lot of interesting flag designs going on around here, but it's not just the UK. There's also like, oh, there's Belgium over there. What did Belgium do in the Congo? I didn't know they had a colony, actually. Could anyone let me know if Belgium did anything good with their colony in the Congo, please? Like, leave a 6-paragraph response about that. See, this is a foolproof way to get engagement. You ask people to detail horrific things in the comments. It's a great idea. But no, obviously Belgium had their colony in Dr. Congo. We have Portugal as well, having a surprising number of colonies. Spain's flag, you'll see, is coming up here a lot. Wow, Spain sure did have a lot of places go independent, but you'll also notice that all across the world, it just seems to be the fact that 90% of the surface area of the Earth was at some point a colony of another country. Only the countries which are listed in this pink color, state which did not come into being via independence from another state, are the ones which you can argue weren't actually colonies. I mean, the UK obviously is an example, Germany being an example, then there's Italy to some extent, there's Turkey, then there's Iran. Literally, you can count these on your hands. Then is that Yemen, that's Ethiopia, I want to say, and then, which is famous for being the only non-colonized part of Africa. Then of course we got Thailand, Bhutan, we got Nepal, and then Japan. That is literally it. I mean, you're kind of stretching things by saying South Korea got their independence from the USA, so I'd add them to the list if I was being totally honest. But still, you have barely 10 countries where they have not received their independence from another state. Even like I mentioned earlier, Sweden, like it's like, yeah, you gotta get it from the, is that from the Danish, actually? I have no idea what that yellow and red flag is, but you gotta get your independence from somewhere, right? And so, the reason I'm making this point right here is because, also, wait, Spain got their independence from France, I guess. I guess at some point they did technically do that. So yeah, also look, all of Eastern Europe here has got these lovely hammers and sickles. Those hammers and sickles must represent something good. I mean, I love to hammer things, and I would love to, sickle my grass, and therefore, what a good flag that is. But yeah, more seriously, the fact that only 10 countries came into being not via independence from another state is a really interesting quirk, right? Also, by the way, this map is unrelated to the video, but I wanted to show you anyway because this is a map of Europe according to the iconography for a person walking across the street. So we have like most of Europe walking left with the UK walking right. Who knows what that means? You can also see how the Polish guy is like upright like a penguin, I just enjoyed this map and wanted to include it in the video. You can't stop me. I include whatever maps I want. Do you want to see a map of dry counties in the USA? I don't know what video this would fit into, but I want to show this map to people anyway. I like maps too much, and it's inhibiting my ability to show you maps. Anyway, more seriously, I think, this map right here is great, but I think the easiest way to put this is to say that even countries, by the way, even some of these countries were always under some sphere of influence, so you can in reality you can go all the way back to a fun flow graph, and you can show who got their independence from whom. And basically every single European country, there are 50 of them, can all be traced back to literally 6 countries. There's Turkey, there's Russia, or the USSR, depending on how you want to, whether you see Russia as a continuation of the USSR or a successor to the USSR, or whether Russia got its independence from the USSR, depends whether you count one or the other. Then you've got got France, then you've got the UK, then you've got Spain, and then you've got Denmark. Actually, there's Germany kind of like up there too. And then also the USA is on here because Austria got its independence from the USA. But like, did it really? You know, like, we're not going to count that too much. So in reality, you can say you've got 7 countries, which every country in Europe got its independence from at some point. And then some of those countries, you can argue, had to get their independence from other ones, like with Spain or like with Denmark. And so, and even when you dive into basically any country, you realize that there are about 6 forces in the world that basically determine the world map as it exists right now. That's not like a surprising thing to most people, but the world was at one point conquered by about 6 or so countries. And, although there are places that are holdouts, there is this really interesting map right here, which is from Vox, if I'm not mistaken, that argues that like even the countries outside of Europe, which weren't under direct European control, they were partially colonized by Europe, or they were in the European sphere of influence. I mean, like, Iran or Mongolia, like, sure, actually, that's a weird one, but like, like Japan was not a colony at any point by any other country. They tried to make their own colonies, be one of those colonization countries, but I believe we had a world war about that one. But anyway, you can see that like they although they technically were never colonized, it was a thing where, was it the Americans or the British or the Dutch? It was a major trading power that said, hey, you will trade with us. They said no, and then they came back with guns and said, you will trade with us now, pew pew pew. Look at my very, very realistic prop I've got for this video. And then the Japanese opened up. And so it's not a colony relationship, but it is a force exerted by the Europeans. That's the whole point behind China. China has never been just a European colony in the same way that India was, but it was in multiple places under the European control, or European influence, you could say at the very least. And so in reality, once you really get down to it, you have like Thailand, but even Thailand, it wasn't under European control, but because it was surrounded by British colonies, and I guess French colonies on the east, it was always very wary of European powers. And so even countries that weren't, and then, once we get to that point where we say, well, all the countries outside of Europe were at one point under European influence, once you go back to this map again, it's like, well, actually, when you dive into things, like at one point, France, the entire continent was against it, and it had to bend to their will. At one point, France basically conquered Germany, brought it into the Napoleonic era. And so, like, is Germany really in there? With the UK, you could argue, like, well, I mean, even though, like, we've had, like, an independent, long-running, continuous, system of government since, like, 1066. What happened in 1066? Did the French come over and is that why we still have all these weird French artifacts in our language? Yes, it is. The UK should celebrate their independence from the French. Can I find out when that is right now? Actually, fun aside, this video has no flow anyway, so let's just break it up and say, you want to know the answer to the question of why there's 7.5 Independence Days in April and 15.5 in May? It's because Israel can't decide what day to celebrate their independence. Long story short, they have a Sabbath. You guys familiar with that Jewish tradition? I'm not that familiar with it because I don't know many Jews. If you're a Jew and you want to be friends, by the way, hit me up. That's something we should do. But yeah, apparently the Sabbath means that they want to move the Independence Day. And so even though their Independence Day is the 14th of May, they celebrate it on different days each year. But that's not their Independence Day moving, that's their Independence Day celebration moving. So I'd argue that this graph is therefore slightly inaccurate. Aaron Strandberg, thank you for the map, by the way. But the other point I wanted to raise right here is that, like, actually, Norman invasion of England. So I guess actually that'd be the opposite of getting independence, right? Okay, so let's just find the British one. Invasions of Normandy. Have I got the wrong? Okay, there we go. That's the one. The Norman Conquest. So as you can see, the Battle of Hastings was the 14th of October, and so we should celebrate. I guess that's the thing. I guess you can't celebrate independence in that way. We should celebrate independence as ending on 14th of October because that's when the French came over here. Except actually, even when you dive into that enough, like, my point of this is to say, even though it is a really catchy thing to say that, well, Europe colonized the world, which is the kind of message this map is leading you towards. Funnily enough, American website wants you to believe that Europe is the one doing all the colonization and that colonization only happens when it's in Europe. But in reality, when you actually look at, if again, we can do that kind of endless mindlessly, like, well, when the Romans took over, Italy took over all of Europe, because the Romans were from Rome. Where is Rome? Rome is in Italy. Therefore, the Italians are the people who everyone got their independence from. When the British finally kicked out the Romans, we celebrated our independence from them. But actually, then the Vikings from like Norway and Denmark, and then they came over and they invaded a large bit of England, including the bit of England that I grew up in. And so like they never really left. There's still like whenever I speak to Northerners today, I'm like, yeah, you can tell you can tell there's a bit of Viking in this guy from the way he talks in grunts and whatnot. Am I just insulting people in my own country at this point? Yes, I am. Every country, even though there is a really strong, compelling argument that, like, yeah, Europeans just did this thing where we took over the world, that's when you see it from the European point of view, which of course you would see it from if you're a European colony, especially a very prominent one, as a lot of these thoughts come from. But in reality, I think, Europe had a really big advantage in a tech game at one particular point in time. All of these countries which were never colonized, in reality, they were colonized from within, right? There was no Thailand since antiquity. At some point, one tribe in this area took over another tribe and took the area, and they formed small communities. And at one point, one of those people would have taken over one of those other people. The country didn't just magically come into existence. Every country, just by sheer notion of the idea, is by some extent down to violence. Because you know what happened in the Battle of Hastings? It wasn't like they came over and they were like, oh yeah, we would like to lead you. And they were like, oh, you have to have an election first, thank you very much. And then they counted the votes, and it turned out we voted for the Normans to conquer us. No, what happens instead is, wow, a ton of people probably died. It's probably not that many, in absolute numbers. Actually, do we have like elite replacement? Wow, our elites got replaced. You hear that? Do you think it will have a death toll on here somewhere? Let's just Control F. Death. There we go. The death of William. No, oh man, there's a lot of mentions of death. Anyway, look, if it might only be like 10,000 people, but adjust that for inflation, and you're deep into the millions of people that had to die for just so we could change a government system effectively, which is definitionally like what you could say colonization is about. They boosted their Normandy colonies by taking over the UK. The Vikings if you look at this map, the reason the Viking map is such a weird one, like the map of the Roman Empire is like this because they actually tried to civilize it, etc. The Vikings were just like, yeah, we're just here to take your stuff. Look, the green areas were never under Viking control. They would just raid it and steal from them. And like, stealing is literally a crime. I think you'll find. You can fact check me on that one. Do a Google search right now. Is stealing a crime? I think you'll find that it actually is. And so, yeah, I guess my point here is to say that, like, you have to, when it comes to, like, oh, yeah, some countries are really bad and they just take over other countries, I think there is a really valid point in that we can't equate all levels of bad to the same. Like, oh, when you think about it, Napoleon was basically as bad as Hitler. Is not a valid point either. Don't get me wrong. There is different levels of bad for different times in history. But I also think that the misguided view that, like, oh, yeah, the only time that it's colonization is when a European does it is an easy way to maybe describe history, but a terrible way to describe how we should, make the world a juster place. And, the way that we seem to be doing that, by the way, is by making more and more countries. In literally 100 years ago, there were fewer than 100 countries. Now we're approaching 200, and the number just keeps going up. We are going to see new countries. In the next century, you'll see like a dozen more. And ultimately, if allowing people to rule themselves is what you think is good, then that's great too. And then, I don't know, just look at your country and work out how you can split it into more pieces, because eventually we can all become smaller and smaller countries until we're all just individually run countries that cooperate together. And then, yeah, I know what I'm saying at this point. I'm just having some fun with you. I hope you'll enjoy this video, by the way. I think I think this is the most interesting, like, line graph of like where people get their independence from. I guess it's really interesting to see that, like, yeah, there is basically Europe has a ton of countries and a ton of cultures, but in reality, we see the culture as being more significant because it happens to be, because they happen to have their own national borders, right? In the same, you don't see, for instance, like Newfoundland culture as being particularly distinct from that in British Columbia, even though they are incredibly different. Like, if you've been to Vancouver and you've been to St. John's or whatever, there is very little they have in common. In Newfoundland, they all sound like Irish people. It used to be a part of the UK. This is one of the most fascinating parts of Canada, in my opinion. And it's like, yeah, but it's just Canada. Because we use, to some extent, a proxy of, like, culture and definition as the nation state, which is very weird in my opinion on one level. But what's even weirder is the fact that this whole video, I've been floating around as a head because I decided to wear green today. Did you like that? That was the real way I was going to get people to leave comments, by the way. I figured, you know what? I'll leave a deliberate way to get people to leave a comment about, you know, like, everyone knows I know about the Dr. Congo though, but you might assume that I might not have known I was wearing a green shirt, which is, like, impossible because I look at myself over there. But whatever, you know what? Did you enjoy that? Did I get you? I got you good? Did I get other people good? Yeah, I hope I did. This is my genius, terrible YouTuber strategy. But yeah, no, I want to finish the point by saying we use a lot of very broad generalizations in history, and it's kind of useful that we do, because, like, you know, when you're trying to describe, like, well, Mesopotamia, you know, Turkey, you might argue that they're a colonizing country, but really, Turkey was a colony of Mesopotamia who took it all. You can do this with everything endlessly until you get to, like, well, the migration of Africa, and so that's what I think is funny, is if you look at this, right, the way Homo sapiens wiped out Homo neanderthalianus or whatever, the way Homo sapiens wiped out Neanderthals, and to some extent Homo Neanderthals, that's what it is. It's not people from the Nederlands, it's from the Neanderthals. But anyway, the way humans wiped out Neanderthals is the most messed up thing you could argue, and so really, the guilt for colonizing the entire planet should lie on Africa. If you really, I'm just saying, if you use the same information, this is the original sin, right? If we're going biblical on this, and it might have been 200,000 years ago. I'm assuming that means 200,000 years ago. I know it's crazy that humans only got to most of the Pacific Islands in the last, you know, few thousand years, and that always blows my mind. That, like, feels incorrect. Also, the fact that it, like, you know, like, the Inuit people are only, like, 4,500 years old. Like, I wonder, you know, in that time period, there was, like, real stuff going down in Europe, and there was just some people, like, wandering up into the icy wastelands. Why would you keep moving into the icy lands? I guess, honestly, before maps, you have no idea what, like, if I didn't have a map and I didn't have a good sense of direction, I wouldn't be able to, like, you know, okay, I'll show you where I live. Do you wanna see my house? Okay, so this is my house right here. I'll quickly zoom in. So, yeah, if I was gonna go from my house to somewhere, like, I don't know, I could guess from the roads that where more roads are, more people probably are. But then, like, I'd know actually if you told me to go to a warmer place, I couldn't instinctively without using northeast, southwest, which maybe they didn't know because they're people heading into the icy lands. They clearly don't, you know, I guess my point here is to say that, like, yeah, climates change on, like, a more local basis than a human can work out. And so, you know what, maybe it's dumb to go up there, or maybe they're really smart. I don't know for sure. Like, you know, same with people who went to the islands. Like, you had a nice little landmass. Why would you go to an isolated island in the middle of nowhere? You know, I'm just saying, there's a lot of weird movements that human beings made over history. Also, you know what, the people who's, like, the Homo sapiens who came from Africa, those guys didn't realize they could get to America. You know, if you wanted to get there, the faster way, you know, I hate to tell you this, I hate to, you know, if you're a human, this is kind of your mistake. So if you're starting in, you know, Dr. Congo, and you want to get to northern Canada, that's the faster way. They messed up. They went the long way around. You know, I don't mean to embarrass you or anything, but this is not the faster way to get there. And so, yeah, if you're ever looking for directions to the north of Canada, I think that in reality it's more like that, right? Whatever you do, don't take advice from a human being. Homo sapiens cannot be trusted. And yeah, was this... I don't know. I think this is the end of the video. If you liked it, then you've got bad taste in YouTube videos. Hope you'll enjoy it, because I'll see you next time. Second channel. Don't care. Goodbye. I lied about saying goodbye. Yeah, you can't even trust me on that. Yeah, no, I apologize. There was like a week I didn't upload on this channel. Was a little busy on the main stuff. But yeah, my goal is to have a short every other day for the month of November. So, you know, we'll see how well that goes. And yeah, I still like to, whenever I see a map, I'm like, I should include that in a video. And I just end up with too many maps that are like, what am I doing with this? You know, like, I get stuff like that all over the place. So there'll be a video, and it'll be about something unrelated to this one in the future. I hope you come around to watch it, because if you don't, then, yeah, I don't know, I make less money. Channel's doing pretty well money-wise, by the way. Thank you for that. I like money. I can use it to buy goods and services. And I appreciate all of you coming along and let me do that. Second channel, don't care. Goodbye.